I know. Robert, I'm just pissing him off left and right. But I love you, and I trust you love me, and isn't that fun? So when Len said, I didn't have my stuff, I mean, that's pretty much what the whole talk is, you know, that we get hung up and strung out by our stuff. And so the talk is hook, line, and sinker. And I love the idea of the fishing scenario of hook, line, and sinker, and hook, line, and thinker. And I started to look for some fishing stories to share with you the concepts of the lesson today. And one of the fishing stories that came about was these two people were walking by this beautiful pond, these two friends, and one said to the other, oh my gosh, look at those fish. They're jumping out of the water. They're so happy. Those fish are so happy. Look at how beautiful and happy they are. And the other friend said, you're not a fish, so how do you know if they're happy? And the first person said, you're not me, so how do you know that I don't know that they're not happy? And right there is the idea of how we get in other people's backyards and we start thinking that we're the authority of things, and we limit each other as opposed to empower each other. You know, I once had a friend come over to my house when I first started working at Bodhi Spiritual Community, and they put me in this leadership role, and I invited someone over for coffee to talk to her about how we could build this particular department. And she came over and she looked around my house and she said, oh. And I was like, what's the matter? And she goes, your house is clean. And I said, yeah. I go, why? She goes, well, you know, you got 4 kids, I got 4 kids. You're getting so much stuff done, and I was just hoping that your house wasn't clean. And I was like, wow. She goes, I said, that's interesting. She goes, well, you know, I was just thinking, like, how do you get it done? And I said to her, well, I was just thinking, how will I not get it done? Like, why wouldn't I get it done? Like, why wouldn't I get it done with grace? We've just been sold a limited story. Like, why wouldn't I be that possible? Why aren't you that possible? You know why not? It's your thought. It's your thought about your possibilities. So we're talking about hook, line, and thinker, and hook, line, and thinker is actually the recipe for attachment. We get attached to a broken idea, and we draw a line in the sand, and we start to overthink it. And I had this other really great story that I stumbled upon about this guy, Anthony Wachman, who in 2013 was fishing down in Kauai. And he caught this 250-pound ahi tuna. And he pulled this fish onto his boat. And he took his hook so he could hook it in the eye to keep it on the boat with him. And this huge fish, 250 pounds, bucked and tossed itself back over the side of the boat, capsized the boat. Shaky dude, capsized the boat and took Anthony down with it. So Anthony was tied up in the line. He was tied up in his own line, going under. This is the miraculous part of this story. He happened to have a waterproof cell phone on him, and he called the Coast Guard, and they saved him. I know. And they got him, and they dragged his boat back, and the whole time he was also dragging the ahi tuna with him. It's kind of interesting, right? I know, it's such an interesting story. But, and I think it's a funny story, and for me it's a very symbolic story. You know, the symbolism is that we get hooked on we get hooked, and our thinking begins to run us. And we think, you know, the fish in the story are our thoughts. And we think, well, our thoughts have us, instead of us having our thoughts. We're in control of our thoughts. We are responsible for our thoughts. Our thoughts aren't responsible for us, even though we give them all of our responsibility and we say, I just couldn't help it. You know, Course in Miracles says that only our thinking can harm us. And if that's the truth, then you've been terrorizing yourself, and I've been terrorizing myself in any way that we feel stuck or stagnant or we want to blame the world. It's not the world. It's our thoughts about the world. So because it's St. Patrick's Day, I wanted to tell you a little poem that I wrote yesterday. First of all, I think it's funny that Anthony got caught by his own fish. I think that's funny. Whoever you are and whatever you do, never ever let your fish catch you. So the idea is, where do you get hung up? Where do you get caught? Where do you get snagged? What thoughts or series of thoughts bring you down? What thoughts or series of thoughts capsize? What's that word? capsize, thank you, capsize your own boat. Like, where is that happening in your life? The fishes are thoughts. They don't have control over us. We have control over them. And the fisherman that becomes attached to his thoughts becomes the source of his suffering. Dalai Lama says that attachment is the origin, the root of suffering. Attachment. So if you don't want to suffer, we must learn the art of detachment. So I came up with this funny little allegory because we do get really attached to certain people, places, and things, certain books, certain ideas, certain concepts. And so I'm going to tell you another story. There was this holy book that held great, great, great wisdom. This holy book, and it became very popular. It was a very popular book, and many, many people fell in love with this teaching. And the goal of this particular book, as a holy book, was peace and love. That was the goal of it. But the more that people began to study this book, they began to make the book actually very, very special. And they became very attached to the book. And they made the book very, very, very precious. And they began to build boxes for the book to keep the book, safe. And they began to have special programs connected to the book and special handshakes and special rituals connected to the book. And the author of the book really didn't mind. He was very detached. He was like, well, you don't really need all those special handshakes and rituals and laws and rules and everything, but, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But what happened was the more and more and more that these different groups became attached to this particular book, the more they began to have conflict, which was actually the opposite of the goal of the book, right? So it was odd to see that even though the goal of the book was peace, that it was being used as a conflicting device, right? So there were many different branches of studying this particular book, and they all agreed that, yes, they all agreed on one thing, that the book's purpose was peace and love. But aside from that, they didn't agree on really anything. In fact, one group was saying, we have the special book, we're the best interpreters of it, and we just happen because we've had it the longest. And the next book said, no, we're the best people with the book. We actually have some missing chapters, and the wording that we use is really the correct one. And another group said, well, you know what? We've been sincere devotees. We study it 24/7. We've created the most curriculum to go with the book. So really, it's our book. And this, we're the right ones. And so they began, instead of studying the book, they began arguing over who had the correct book. And one day, as they were bickering in the courtyard, the author comes by. And they were like, oh my gosh, here's the author. We're going to ask him. We're going to ask him who's the right one. And so they did. They caught him up and they said, hey, which of these manuscripts is correct? And the author reminded all the different tribes, like, it's about peace and love, remember? And he spoke for a while about trust and open-mindedness and defenselessness and tolerance and compassion and humor. He had a great sense of humor. By the time he was done, they were all kind of laughing and slapping each other on their backs and just joking, right? And because he had a great sense of humor. And as he began to go, right before he left, they were like, but wait, who's right? They were really addicted to wanting to know who was right. And the author again turned back to them and said, remember, it's about love and peace. And they all nodded, very devoted and scholarly, because they wanted to make sure that he knew they were the most reverent. And he continued saying, and you know that actually love and peace, they're not actually in the book. You're not going to find love and peace in the book. You're going to find it amongst each other, just like we just experienced when you were slapping each other on the back and you were laughing. The book is neutral, And so they listened to him, and they tried to be patient with his babbling. But eventually, they asked him again, who's right? And they had a really good argument because they were like, look, this is an important book, if you didn't know. Okay? Because we're divided here, and we need to know who has the right book, because someone here has the wrong book, and what if we're teaching the wrong book? That's really, really important. It's very important to get this right. If we don't get it right, what could happen? So the author was a very patient man, and so again he began telling them about how it wasn't really their responsibility to fix the world, that they don't have domain over that. They only had domain over their own minds, only their thoughts about the world. And he tried to tell them that if they got too attached to the world and the form, that they would experience great pain, as they were doing in this circle where they wanted to crucify each other. But by that time, when he told them about this thing, that they only had domain over their own minds, they really didn't want to hear it, and they started booing him. They were like, boo, just give us the answer. So finally the author said, okay, I will give you an answer that I hope will satisfy you. This is what you can do if you really want to work with this book. If you really want to work with this book and you and your brother disagree on a particular passage, then what I would suggest is you take that passage and you rip it out and you crumble it up and you throw it in the fire. And this sent a huge hush over the community. And he thought to himself, finally, they're getting it. They understand. But really what was happening was they all were coming to a universal agreement. And the agreement was, we must kill the author. And so they did. And they finally agreed on something. It is a wicked little tale, isn't it? And it's funny because it's true. I mean, there's a certain degree of this going on in ourselves and in the world where we try and divide God in a million different pieces and say, our God's better than your God. And it's just insane. It's insane thinking. So they got hooked, line and thinking, into their own pain. And we're not here to get hung up and strung out. We're not here to get hung up and strung out. And we could say, well, we think, like we're fish, that we just get caught and snagged on something, but we don't. We are spiritually mature individuals here, and we can say for sure that we let ourselves get hooked. In fact, some of us actually take the hook and say, you got me. I'm yours. I'm your bitch. And we go around like spiritual prostitutes, hooking ourselves, giving it away to any Tom, Dick, or Harry. We don't take responsibility for our own peace of mind. And you will know if you're not in your own peace of mind is the degree to which you are happy, the degree to which you are in peace. If you are not in peace, you have created an alternative altar and you've allowed yourself to give your power away. And it's really that simple. And it's not based on any book or Bible or building or special handshake. It's all an inside job. So we could say in these areas where we feel hooked or snagged, we could say honestly, I would rather focus on this than focus on my connection with God. Wherever we go, we have it in one place, we have it in every place. So we go over here and we say, I'm right and you're wrong, 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 and suddenly we've built ourselves a box. And we're inside this box. And our life begins to get smaller and smaller and smaller. It's the judgment box. And from this little box, we look out at the world. And we start to build these hierarchies of importance, of who has it and who doesn't have it. And it's spiritual malpractice, It's what we engage in, is spiritual malpractice. And we get our thinking on once we're in the box. Once we're in the box, we get all of our thinking on. We're like, they're wrong. And we sit in that box and we talk and we think and we engage in these ideas about how they're wrong. Whatever there is, and it could be a political party, it could be a person, it could be a neighbor, whatever it is, if you got someone on the other side of the line, you're building yourself a box. There's no two ways about it. And then we do the one thing that we are not designed to do. We think. We get our thinking on, We're not designed for thinking. We think we're designed for thinking, but if we let go of when we say our thinking, we're already in a limited space because it's ours. We want to be channels. And when we channel the thoughts of the divine, they're not our thoughts. They come through us. I can attest to that, you know what I mean? Like even when we would do voice box, you're not planning anything. You're just listening to the divine and the next right song comes to you. When I do these talks, people go, well, how do you come up with all these songs? I don't know. I get the title, and then by Sunday night, I get the talk. And I don't try to figure out what to say. And I am no special genius here. When you're working with those kids, it's not like you're reverting back to the books that you studied to work with kids on special needs. You own that information. And it's not just because you studied that information, but you have been preordained to carry that information into the world. When you began to study it, you just started agreeing with God that you were willing to do that. Do you understand what I'm saying? When you sing those songs, it's not like you're dipping into all the wisdom that you learned from every teacher that you ever had. You've been preordained from this. Those classrooms and teachers were just your way of saying, I need to jump through hoops in order to get to who I'm really here to be. But you were designed to do that. It's the same thing with me. It's the same thing with the rest of you. You're already designed to meet up with every single moment that you have in the most audacious way without conditions. So your house does not have to be dirty. You do not have to accept limited ways or limited thinking from anyone, and specifically not from yourself. Yeah. Amen. Thank you, Al. You know I love a good yeah. So in the Bible, it even says, like, if the eye causes you to fall into sin, pluck it out. For it's better to enter the kingdom of God with one eye than to have two eyes and be cast into the fire of hell. Now, I don't believe in the fire of hell, but if we thought about hell, it would mean pain and separation. That's what hell would mean. And does that mean that we're supposed to pluck our eye out? No, it doesn't mean that. It means that we're not going to let the form get in the way of the content. That's what it means. We're not going to allow the form to get in the way in the content. Instead of engaging in hook, line, and thinking, we're going to practice something completely different, which is pause, peace, and presence. Pause, peace, and presence, which you were designed for. You were designed, because if you're thinking, you're running down the street with your hair on fire. If you're pausing, you're waiting for the divine wisdom of God to flow through you, and it should feel effortless. So when you feel like you're being hooked, right there, you could say, right now, I'm a fish out of water. You know how it feels to be a fish out of water? You're hooked. You're outside of your natural state of being. You're not here. You're not designed to be hooked. So as soon as you feel like you've been hooked, you could say to yourself, girl or guy, I'm right now out of my natural state of being. Let me get unhooked by pausing and reconnecting with my divine intuition and listening to that divine intuition so I can retain my peace. It's really a natural recipe. And then when you retain your peace, you begin to be in the presence, right here and right now in this present. So the idea with pausing, I like to use the word wait. And wait is W-A-I-T. You could say, what am I thinking here? Why am I engaging in such thoughts of ridicule and condemnation? You could even say, what am I teaching here? Why am I teaching myself in the world that I live in a fractured place and a limited idea? I'm not willing to teach that. You could even ask yourself, why am I thinking? Which is my favorite. Why am I thinking? Because when I'm thinking, I'm not here. I'm not right here with you. I'm thinking. It excuses me from the experience. And the reason that most of us do that 99% of the time is because we are programmed not to experience intimacy with each other. It feels too raw. You could poke me in the eye, or I might find something here that's displeasing. But if I really allow myself to be in the presence of your audacious nature, I will do nothing but fall in love. That's what happens. As I fall in love, you fall in love. And so all of this thinking is the very thing that prevents us from experiencing our holy state of being. So, and what I like to say is God doesn't need my thoughts, and God certainly doesn't need your thoughts. If your God needs your thoughts, you got to get a bigger God and a smarter God. You know what I mean? God says, this is the day that I've made for you to rejoice and be glad. Stop thinking about it. Just be in it. Just show up to it. And you'll say, well, God, I'm not down with all your surprise parties. And God's like, well, that's all I got. You know, because you can't handle the whole truth, so I got to give you it on a minute-to-minute basis. Otherwise, you'll go running down the street trying to figure out what comes next. So instead of thinking, stay present. Stay in the presence, in the peace, in the patience, because there is this magic that lives here in these things at this present moment. And if you stay present in this moment, that divine author of all that's good and beautiful and holy will return to you. And you will experience the ability to step outside your box and your borders and your buildings and your books and your Bibles, and your hands will be empty to love and serve the world. And that's what we're here for, and that's the word. philosophy and theology, be still and know God. So Mike came to us, talking about this ministry that he's bringing down to some high schools where he's teaching meditation. And we supported him last year, and we're supporting him again this year. And who knows the ripple effect that can come from these kids that are being cared for in such competent hands as Mike Wyson sees. So we wanted to present him with this check that we're tithing to him over the next couple months. Yeah. This we did together. $600 that came from Pam's art class, that came from Carol's selling of the soaps, and that came from Speakeasy dipping into our tithing. So this is a total joint effort. So thank you for being part of it.
Just to speak a little bit about what this goes to and how big of an impact it has. So we have a meditation program that's being studied by the University of Chicago. A lot of policymakers look at these studies to see if the programs that we offer, if they have any impact. So, thank you guys.